Welcome, everyone, to today's ICTC virtual panel discussion, FDI and the post-COVID economy, where we'll be diving into foreign direct investment and growing tech ecosystems. Before we get into it, I'll just let you know, you can put in comments in Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching it, and please add questions. We'll be addressing those at the end. Now, to get into it, I would love to introduce the leader of the digital think tank by ICTC, who will be our moderator today, Alexandria Cutin. Take it away, Alexandria.
Thank you, Tyler, and thanks everyone who is able to join today. Today we have what I think is an interesting discussion and a very timely one. It's on foreign direct investment and really its role in the Canadian economy as we rebound from COVID-19, one of the largest exogenous shocks to the economy to date, and figure out how we want to plan our economy going forward, but in so doing, how we can enable essentially our homegrown startup ecosystem for technology companies. So this is prompted in part by a white paper we recently released called Bolstering Growth, the Next Frontier for Canadian Startups. And in this paper, we really discussed how foreign direct investment can actually be an enabler to homegrown ecosystem growth, how it can help startups in the Canadian economy not only innovate, but also commercialize and export by creating those connections. So it's not really, do we support local ecosystem growth or do we support FDI? It's not one or the other, but in fact, it is both, particularly as we kind of rebuild from the COVID-19 crisis and as our economy becomes more and more digital at the core. So to kick us off today, I will let our esteemed panelists introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their organizations, and a couple of key projects that are really exciting them as they're working on them. So we'll start with you, Chris.
Hi, my name is Christopher Chen, head of the Invest HK presence here for Canada, driving foreign direct investment from Canadian companies, entities, academia, nonprofits into Asia via Hong Kong.
All right, over to you. Yeah, or do you have a project that you're working on currently that you would like to highlight a little bit?
Yeah, right now we're working on several key strategic pillars. In those pillars being fintech, life sciences, family offices, which is a subset of asset management, and furthering promotion of something we call the Greater Bay Area, which is a super economic region of 9 cities of Southeast China, Hong Kong being one of them, that performs like a super economic region, not unlike the Silicon Valley of the United States or the Ruhr Valley or the corridor between Toronto and Montreal. So we work closely with specific bureaus and agencies of the Hong Kong government to promote this region as well as the economic opportunities within the previously mentioned subsectors.
Really interesting. And of course, the life sciences connection is very timely these days in particular. So looking forward to hearing a bit more about that later on. Jaap, over to you.
Yeah, good morning. So Jaap Slothauer, kind of a difficult name maybe to pronounce, but officially Jacob in the passport. Like Chris, foreign direct investment geared towards Europe through the Netherlands. That's our primary goal. Myself, I'm heading the Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency here in Canada. So we're going cross-border through our office here at the Consulate General in Toronto. We're part of the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and basically it depends on our client base here in Canada, whether we work on the strategic side of the portfolio or in operationalizing and improving the effectiveness and efficiency of Canadian companies expanding to the Netherlands or that are already in the Netherlands, like so many already are, and supporting them in their continuous improvement in finding new markets and continually being successful in what these companies do. So it's of course with COVID around, it's completely different. It's become very interesting in broadening our services. So not only what we used to do, very, positive minded in attracting. Now we're also very much supporting Canadian business in retention and supporting them in the opportunities that also the Dutch government gives in making sure that we survive this challenging time. So that's basically it. I think like Chris, there's so many projects that we're currently running with the team here. I think half of them I can share with you are in the IT tech sector. So as we move forward in this next hour, I can share some of these ideas. I think what I find important is impact. So it's not so much about bigger is better in FDI. It's the impact we're making in kind of a win-win for the Dutch ecosystems, as well as, of course, for the Canadian companies. So I think the project that we're really working on now, which is really interesting, is geothermal work that we're doing with Ever out of Calgary. They're going to be based out of the Netherlands, and it's just very exciting to see how the technology and the innovation here in Canada is going to be able to support an ecosystem, also from a challenge perspective in getting carbon dioxide down and heating out of gas moved into the geothermal space. To get that going with Canadian companies. So it's very impactful, and it's just very exciting to work with.
That's great to hear. And certainly, I think, as we've seen with the European New Green Deal, as well as in the throne speech, there's a lot of incentive really going forward to change our economy to one that is more sustainable and more environmentally friendly going forward. And awesome to hear that you're working with this company in Calgary. I know Alberta certainly has a long history of success on the geothermal front, and really a lot to offer, both the Canadian ecosystem and international ones as well. So thank you. Caricia, next.
Hi, everyone. Apologies for the lack of video camera, some technical difficulties, but really excited to connect with all of you and talk about foreign direct investment on this panel. So I am the research manager at Invest in Canada. So Invest in Canada is a government departmental corporation that was set up in 2018 in the spring. And its goal is primarily to promote, facilitate, and attract foreign direct investment, FDI, into Canada. And FDI is a critical component of Canadian economy. It's something that we focus on. We know it brings in jobs, more investment dollars into Canada from globally headquartered companies, which then in turn fosters innovation, it enhances productivity, and brings in more access to international markets. All good things for the Canadian ecosystem. So Invest in Canada's main objective is to attract these large investments to Canada by promoting Canada as a top investment destination to the world. We try to be we aim to be the primary investor concierge service for foreign companies who are pondering investment opportunity in Canada. And we work with many partners across the federal, provincial, territorial, municipal ecosystem to provide these foreign companies with customized services. And part of these services include customized research, the group that I oversee. A lot of companies have interest in learning about specific sectors and industries within Canada for potential investment, whether it's in established legacy industries that have contributed to our economy for a long time, such as manufacturing or mining, or even emerging industries such as AI. Companies want to know a lot about what the Canadian ecosystem looks like, what the landscape is, how many Canadian companies exist in a particular industry, what the talent pool looks like for a particular sector-specific regulations, access to trade agreements, and what are the favorable tariffs if they were to set up an affiliate within Canada, and other compelling value propositions to invest in the country. So lots of interesting research requests that my team receives daily from global investors. And recently, and definitely the theme of today's discussion, foreign investors have been we're constantly curious to know as to how COVID-19 is impacting Canada's economic business environment and what that means for their potential investments in the country.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Caricia. And for sure, I think that last point you hit on about how the Canadian economy is evolving, and especially how we're seeing sector transformation take place, is really important for how we can move forward in attracting investment and ensuring that we also are enabling our local ecosystems to thrive at the same time. So on that topic, I'll start with a question for everybody, which is really kind of to get an idea of the role that FDI plays in your country, and also how you've seen that evolve over the years. So have your strategies on attracting FDI changed, or are you looking at specific sectors, particularly as the economy is becoming to some degree at least more digital at the core, and of course as COVID has disrupted that a little bit? So a pretty big question, but I'll put it out there for everybody to answer. And Caricia, since you just spoke last about this, maybe I'll start with you.
Okay, sure thing. Sure thing. So as we are aware, FDI is a key contributor to the Canadian economy, bringing in jobs, bringing in capital to the country. And since 2017, FDI's contribution to our GDP, national GDP, a key measure of Canada's economic health, has been growing. And it's no surprise, given the amount of investment dollars brought into Canada from foreign investment in 2018 being at $56.3 billion. And then at 2019, it was at $67.2 billion. As you can tell, I'm a manager of a research team, data and stats driven. So since we were established in 2018, IIC, Investing Canada's target sectors, have been technology, advanced manufacturing, clean tech, agribusiness, life sciences, media entertainment, and natural resources, encompassing both Canada's established legacy sectors, such as natural resources, that remain top contributors to FDI, but also including other transformative sectors that are impacting multiple industries within Canada, such as technology and clean tech. Nevertheless, as Invest in Canada grows, as we lead the development of the Government of Canada's national FDI strategy, and as the priorities of the federal government may change, our areas of focus may shift in the future, but we are focused very much on a lot of emerging industries that are transformative and impacting the whole economy. And something I also wanted to highlight is the impact of technology to date on Canada's FDI. In Statistics Canada's reporting, technology is represented as ICT, and ICT has contributed a total of $24.8 billion in total accumulated FDI in Canada as of the end of 2019, which is an increase of over 50% since 2017. Because in 2017, at that point, technology had contributed $16.5 billion to total FDI in Canada. And in comparison, total accumulated FDI across all sectors, all industries, had grown by 17.5% from 2017 to 2019. So technology is clearly a rapidly growing industry, and in particular, a growing contributor to Canada's FDI. And of course, a recent development, which we're all well aware of, is COVID and how it's impacting Canada's FDI. FDI numbers reported from Statistics Canada earlier this year for Q2 showed FDI inflow at $10.8 billion, which was a decrease of 13.8% from Q1 of this year, and a pretty massive drop of 46.9% from Q2 of 2019. However, we're not alone in seeing a decline in FDI. This is being felt globally. And the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, projected earlier this year that FDI flows globally would decrease by 40% in 2020 and decrease by a further 5 to 10% for 2021, which is the lowest levels we've seen in the past 2 decades. Looking at the recently released report, end of October, has shown us some already interesting figures. Global FDI inflows have fallen by 49% in that first half of 2020 in comparison to 2019. And while developed economies as a whole fell by 75% in the first half of this year, and Australia and US had fallen by 40 and 61%, Canada's FDI inflows for the first half of this year had fallen by 32%. So we are faring better than a lot of developed economies in terms of our FDI numbers. So it's interesting to see these numbers come up because it links with some of our team's previous research that we had done on how Canada has been impacted from past crises and how FDI had been altered and how we recovered following the early 90s recession, the 2008-2009 financial crisis. And some findings that I found really interesting was following the 90s recession, Canada was the only G7 country to demonstrate 8 years of consecutive increases in FDI inflows. Following the 2008-2009 financial crisis, Canada was also the only G7 country to display 4 years of consecutive increases in FDI inflows. So while other countries faced declines in FDI in that aftermath of those previous historical recessions, Canada rebounded fairly well in comparison to its G7 peers. So it's interesting to see that from past data and now recent data from this year, we're already starting to see that resilience and the recovery coming through.
Thanks, Caracia. And I think one thing you mentioned earlier about kind of emerging technology sectors, if you want to call them that, for example, like FD or like AI could play a key role in how we rebound and how we continue to digitize the economy going forward. Yap, maybe I'll go next to you. So you mentioned geothermal and working with that Calgary company to initiate that project. Has renewable energy or clean tech always been a key priority for the Netherlands in terms of FDI, or has this evolved over time? And if so, what are the strategies or priorities that you might have today?
Yeah, good point. And decisions are hard to make when there's this humongous menu of opportunities between our two countries, and clean tech is definitely one. Here at the consulate, the trade commissioners are working very closely with Dutch partner companies, bringing their technology and working from a clean tech perspective. Here in Canada, we're doing vice versa. There's a big focus from both the NFIA as well as the embassy in the Netherlands here to get that connected. But from a broader perspective, FDI is just very important for our country. I think our history, whether it's trade or FDI, goes back 400 years. It's in our culture. It's a thing we do, and I think it's because we're such a small country, but with a pretty large population of 17 plus million people. We're kind of outgoing, and we're trying to tap into these different ecosystems for centuries to benefit, I think, both parties at the end of the straw. So we have accumulated about 15,000 foreign entities, individual entities in the Netherlands that make up about 10-11% of our workforce. Here I'm trying to match Caricia's statistical things. I'm going to go for some numbers too, but no, I'm not a real numbers person, but I think overall it really goes to show with these 15,000 companies, and it's a humongous impact on our very open and transparent economy. And FDI is and was a very important one. The industries that we're focusing on, I think, really depends on which NFIA office you're talking to. So here in Canada, of course, we have a specific relationship on a specific set of industries. In Asia and in Africa and in Europe itself, it might of course be different. We are thus a network organization, I think, like any FDI organization is. But just to give some numbers, downwards from our office into the Dutch ecosystems, we're working with 14 organizations to help support those primary Canadian questions to be answered properly in the Netherlands with boots on the ground. So that's what we call the Invest in Holland brand, where the NFIA and regional development agencies work very closely together to match specific push and pull criteria that will make it work for Canadian companies to make the decision. And then on the other side of the spectrum, moving out into the world, we have 29 locations worldwide with our offices, usually based out of consulates and embassies, to make sure that we really tap into that culture. And that's what we've also done here in Canada. Canada is not the US. We're very transparent about that. There's a different culture, different way of doing our work. I do get challenged, by the way, once in a while on the West Coast that I'm supposed to be from Toronto and from somewhere very far away. Well, in miles that might be the case, but it's still great to have an office here and support Canadian companies from a Canadian perspective. So what we're looking at now is that we are trying to challenge the following statistics. They're not very recent because they're from 2018, but if you take a look at investments going from the Netherlands to Canada, you're talking about $107 billion on investment into our country. So I think that's great for Carisha and the team. We are putting a lot of effort into to getting Dutch IP technology and anything else here. On the other end of the spectrum, we're about trying to reach that 40 billion compared to the 107 on Canadian investments towards the Netherlands. So that's an interesting gap. I think that's unfair, and that's why our office is here to better support. I think also the strategy that the Canadian company has in diversifying its market and not only focusing on a great southern neighbor market, but also going east and west and risk diversifying your product portfolio. So that is a benefit that from an FDI perspective in the Netherlands, we can also see that our numbers are really great, and I can iterate the comments from Carisha. I totally agree. We've been reading about it for years now that FDI is slowing down. We're going into protectionistic, populist, geopolitical trends that are not really supporting, let's say, on the contrary, CETA agreements, which should, of course, really start supporting trade between continents. And from that perspective, it is from an FDI side quite challenging. If you take a look at it from a Dutch-Canadian axis, we're doing really well. We've been growing double-digit percentages over the past years, and I think partially that's trying to ramp up the business that we've been doing for the past 3-4 years. So that's of course helping us moving from scratch to a formal entity. But it also goes to show that in history there are just great and strong economic and social ties between our countries that are really helping, let's say, the 1+ million Dutch-related Canadians here to see how markets in Europe are going to benefit their entrepreneurial work. So I'm very happy to say we're a little bit different than the global trend, and it's fair to say that's justified by so many reasons, both from an economic as well as a social perspective, that I think will overcome COVID and will continue to strengthen both our economies. So really looking forward to that.
Excellent, thank you, Jaap. And I'm really glad you mentioned CETA, as I think this is one agreement that we are fortunate to have in place in Canada, which does allow us access to one of the largest economies in the world, right? So I think that Canada and the Netherlands have very strong cultural ties, historic ties, but it's great that we have this opportunity now to continue to expand to Europe and to help Canadian companies reach those markets as well.
Yes, yeah. Very exciting to see how CETA eventually evolves. It's good to see that there's also now a new agreement between the UK and Canada. I think that should strengthen Canadian exports. And we're very happy to see that CETA already operationalized and see it on the P&L and the ledger of Canadian companies that are really seeing the benefits of that. Tapping into, I believe, 170 million plus people. If you take a look at a 500 kilometer circumference from the Netherlands, in how you're tapping into this humongous European market, is personally really helping the Dutch economy as well. So I really hope it's going to be ratified and it's going to be smooth sailing from there.
You and I both. Over to you, Chris. Any thoughts on the role of FDI in your country and also how it's evolved over the years or in recent times?
No problem. First off, just a little bit of a disclaimer. Hong Kong is not actually a country. It's a special administrative region. And that actually is important in this description that I'm going to be giving. And the reason that Hong Kong is its own independent jurisdiction, with it based on a Western legal rule of law. However, it is part of China, but it does operate as its own economic and legal entity. So the question, which is, what role does FDI play in Hong Kong? Actually, I would go so far as to say that FDI is actually synonymous with Hong Kong's economy, in the reason that Hong Kong, being a jurisdiction of only about 7 million people, with very little human resources, little natural resources, depends upon FDI in foreign inflow of capital from all over the world in order to thrive. If you look at Hong Kong's background as being a major trading port, and that's going all the way back to the 1800s, to being a major financial center, the world's third largest, since the 1970s, that has actually created an interdependence on international trade and foreign direct investment. If you actually think about the bulk of Hong Kong's white-collar workers, the vast majority of them are working for a foreign headquartered multinational or foreign-located company. Now, going back to the historical context of FDI and how it's changing to today, as I said, Hong Kong is and continues to be a major financial center. There has been a strategic push over the last 10 years to diversify the fundamentals of Hong Kong's economy to be less dependent on financial services and on being a major trading port. And because of that, there have been significant investments in FDI, significant investments in education, significant investments in infrastructure towards branching out towards industries that could leverage the financial services and international trading port background. The first and foremost of these is fintech. Fintech being relatively new to the world, but fintech is basically low-hanging fruit. Hong Kong being a major investment center with a huge concentration of capital and financial management expertise, is a natural place to leverage fintech expertise. With 160 banks, 160 insurance companies, 700 venture capital firms, it was a no-brainer to shift that expertise and capital towards fintech. And so the rise of the Hong Kong fintech industry has been enormous over the last 10 years. Another one was life sciences, and that was a major policy shift that came about 10 years ago, when the Hong Kong government realized it was sitting on about 20 years of unbroken hospital records, which in Asia is significant because that's the single largest unbroken stream of hospitalization records, one person, one record in the region, plus the expertise, the education of medical professionals in Hong Kong is unsurpassed in Asia. The vast majority of the doctors came from Western universities, top-tier universities, and their specialization and expertise was unparalleled. The other thing that created a strategic shift was something that Hong Kong has always had, which is the rule of law. When a foreign company comes into Hong Kong, the rule of law, which here in Canada we take that for granted. We have a Western legal basis of business law and personal law. In Hong Kong, that rule of law is actually a safe haven compared to many other jurisdictions. So if you're a technology company, whether it's fintech, whether it's innovation technology, whether it's biotech, you want to protect your intellectual property, you want to protect your financial assets. So using Hong Kong as a springboard to enter other jurisdictions, but maintaining your intellectual and financial assets in Hong Kong actually becomes a major factor upon consideration of establishing a regional HQ. Another strategic shift was towards the establishment of what we call family offices, the family offices practice. Family offices is effectively servicing ultra high net worth individuals. Now, it's not unique to Hong Kong, but it's basically something that in Asia Pacific we talk a lot about asset classes such as ultra high net worth or emerging wealthy. Quite a lot. It's sort of parlance that comes from banks and asset managers. In the Greater Bay Area, there's 80,000 ultra high net worth families forming the basis of the asset management industry. And we found that there's a lot of, even here in Canada, there are a lot of ultra high net worth individuals who want to not just park their money in Hong Kong, but also leverage the financial expertise that Hong Kong brings, plus the access to mainland China and ASEAN, kept safe by the rule of law. So basically, they want the best of both worlds. They want that Asia expansion, the world's most dynamic region, but they want to keep things safe. They don't want to go in blind, and they want to make sure that their assets are kept safe. So after those strategic pillars, in terms of Invest HK, we ourselves have changed over the last several years. COVID-19 was a major factor in that regard. The rise of other regions around Asia Pacific and becoming more competitive has also forced us to step up our game. Nowadays, even though we don't go after every industry, we go after specific niche industries that we can use our own historical context to leverage from. But we've started leveraging artificial intelligence and data mining to be much more, I wouldn't say much more selective, but to be at least less blind when we conduct our outreach when identifying companies in the growth stage that are ready and willing to tap into the Asia Pacific markets. Since over the year, our remit has been slightly changed. We're still conducting FDI. We're being very specific in terms of the industries that we're conducting outreach. You consider it low-hanging fruit. We are selling the Greater Bay Area on equal footing as selling Hong Kong. We're selling the super economic region, a core driver of growth, as well as Hong Kong. Hong Kong being a great place to set up your regional headquarters. Well, should you not be considering a service facility or manufacturing facility in the Greater Bay Area, which has a population of 70 million people and has a GDP the same size as Canada. And effectively, these are 10 cities of China, Hong Kong inclusive, encircling the Pearl River Delta, Macau, Zhuhai, Guangdong, Xiamen, and basically functioning as a country unto itself. And that region actually contributes about 10% of the GDP for the entire mainland China. So we are focusing a lot on diversification. We're focusing a lot on espousing the benefits of the Greater Bay Area. In the future, over the next year, we'll be espousing the benefits of what we call the Innovation Technology Commission, which is basically a body with the Hong Kong government that is taking practical and tactical, creating tactical opportunities within Hong Kong and the Greater Bay Area for technology companies. And we're also going to be starting a talent initiative. This was just announced last week, where we will be promoting people actually working in the Greater Bay Area in order to fill all the jobs that are being created by the innovation and technology sectors, we need more people. Whether they come from China, whether they come from Canada, whether they come from the United States, we need more people. And this is new for us as well. We know we're not talent people, we're not human resources people, but this is a new remit that we are taking on top of FDI and selling the benefits of a region overall. Just a little bit about us. Invest HK, similar to the Dutch agency that Jaap works for, we have 28 offices. I think you said 29 or something. We have 28 offices around the world. Invest HK is located in the economic and trade offices for Hong Kong in each respective country. Effectively, they are consulates. Within Canada, there are about 300,000 Canadians living in a population of 6.5 to 7 million, which actually forms the largest contingent outside of, say, mainland China, forms the largest contingent of a Western country's nationality within Hong Kong. The Canadian Chamber of Hong Kong is the single most strongest, organized, efficient, and productive chamber of commerce located in Hong Kong. There are 200 Canadian originated companies in Hong Kong. That would be companies that are actually headquartered here in Canada. And they range from companies like Manulife and Sun Life, RBC. And then there are 700 Canadian-owned companies, inclusive of the 200 companies, in Hong Kong, meaning that they were founded by Canadian passport holders within Hong Kong. The linkage between Canada and Hong Kong is very, very strong, particularly in parts of Ontario and British Columbia. So much so that it's actually been to our benefit that whenever we go into a presentation, we never have to talk about who we are. Basically, the Canadian Chinese population here in Canada, in British Columbia and Vancouver alone is immense. And here in Ontario, it's actually it's not the biggest, but it's certainly one of the most vocal and one of the most active. And so we've always had the benefit of enjoying a strong cultural tie between the two regions.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. And one thing you mentioned at the start, which is that for Hong Kong, FDI is kind of synonymous to the local economy there. And I kind of want to put out this question to both you and Jaap, but what's interesting in my perspective about both Hong Kong and the Netherlands is the two countries are not only strong at attracting FDI, but they're also pretty strong at developing the local technology ecosystem or local digital economy and helping those companies export and reach new markets. So my question for you is, when you are seeking to attract FDI to your areas, what role does the efficacy of the local ecosystem play? For example, if the target is life sciences, does it really help to have a very strong life sciences local ecosystem of small and medium-sized businesses? Is that a pull factor for FDI? And we'll start with you, Chris.
Okay. Absolutely. In Hong Kong, there is actually I'll use both fintech and life sciences. Let me start with life sciences. The life sciences ecosystem in Hong Kong is actually spearheaded by the government itself. It all starts with the hospital authority, which is the Hong Kong equivalent Ministry of Health, and it's basically a top-down. It's a top-down initiative meant specifically for increasing the size of the local life sciences industries. And again, it gets quite specific in terms of biotech, medical devices, not so much pharmaceuticals, because actually it does make sense, for example, to do that somewhere else, really. But basically, what the government has done, and I'm going to talk about the government side of things, is that it actually creates a rich network of funding and support in research and development, applied sciences, government subsidies. For example, if you were a biotech company and you wanted to set up in Hong Kong, and you wanted to set up, say, a service office or a new business development office in Hong Kong, it makes sense to talk to several government agencies to help you get started. First off, you would talk to us, InvestHK, for helping you set up, but then we would introduce you to other members of the ecosystem. For example, the hospital authority, for example, for potential procurement. In turn, we would introduce you to the Innovation and Technology Commission, and through them, the Innovation Technology Venture Fund, which is a US $13 billion venture capital seed pot meant for companies specific in innovation technology. And a good portion of that is actually dispersed towards the life science industry. You basically have, if you meet the criteria, you apply for it, and we can help you with that. We will also introduce you to the Applied Sciences division of the Hong Kong government called ASTRI. In the event that you're interested in technology transfer, we make introductions to the Productivity Council. If you want to meet potential distributors, we'll introduce you to the TDC, the Trade Development Council. And if you want to set up facilities across the border or into the Greater Bay Area, we'll introduce you to the relevant government authorities. We also help you secure the licensing if you're a regulated entity. And if you're interested in clinical trials, we'll build the strategy for you to undertake those clinical trials to get your product to market. So that is and on the private sector side, we will, upon a company's request, we do have a fairly large network of venture capitalists, private equity investors, banks, insurance companies that we'd be happy to facilitate the introduction to. And one of the reasons we do this, and we sort of had discussions with the Trade Commissioner Service of Canada, is that it's easy to enter a country. Doing well in another country is something else entirely. And for that, we always believe that companies need help. So you could set up an office, but in order for you to do well, in order for you to fly, you do need to be shepherded a little bit. You do need to be handheld. You do need to meet the right people in order to the right networks in order for your business to get off the ground. Apologize. Someone obviously doesn't know I'm in the middle of doing the presentation. And the same goes for fintech. And fintech, for example, has its own separate network, separate ecosystem of companies and trade associations, government agencies, and private sector investors that we facilitate the introductions for.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Chris. And Jaap, I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well, because the Netherlands is such a strong ecosystem of kind of local technology companies and also companies that have managed to export. The Netherlands does quite well in attracting FDI and also exporting. So in your perspective, for example, if you are trying to attract FDI from Canada to the Netherlands in the technology space, does having that strong ecosystem of technology companies in the Netherlands serve as a pull factor for FDI?
Yes, that's a simple answer, and it's of course based on I think a lot on what Chris just mentioned. It's if you take a look at, again, life science and health, I don't know where the chicken egg ends and the egg starts and vice versa, but life sciences and health is pretty big in the Netherlands. It's one of the healthiest ecosystems in Europe concerning innovation across all lines of LSH, which was already there. It's a good combination of, let's say, the triple helix, where government agencies and the private sector and research and development and universities work very close together. That have brought, for example, in this case, the European Medicine Agency to the Netherlands. Following the Brexit, it had to move out of the UK into another country, and we were fortunate enough to, I think, have a good systematic approach between, all agencies to make sure that we got the best out there to the EMA and get an agreement on what the strength was of the Netherlands and is concerning LSH. But it was, but what you then see is the reason the EMA chose for the Netherlands was a strong ecosystem. So we got the whale in following the fish, but then once the whale was in, we've had an enormous attraction of, let's say, the smaller and I find very innovative entrepreneurial front end technology partners, also from all provinces in Canada, to be interested in that area where the EMA resides. So it's a pull for small to follow big, but also big to follow small. And I think that's been a very interesting move in the past 10, 12 years, where you see that life sciences and health in the west of the Netherlands has become a major hub. And from there, also a stepping stone into other areas like Germany and like France, which of course have large pharmaceuticals, etc. So yeah, it's definitely one. I also notice Canadian companies being a little more risk averse than, for example, my experience working in the US. There's more a relationship needed on trust, on endurance, on keeping your word, going through the details, patience. What I've noticed is that it's also, sometimes we use the word fact-finding trips as one of the opportunities Canadian companies can have to go around now virtually through ecosystems in the Netherlands, meet people, meet offices, office space, HR reps, etc. But what I do notice in these ecosystems from a Canadian perspective is that it's also been great to introduce Canadian companies that haven't expanded but have shown their interest to talk to Canadian companies that have already done that move. And especially if it's in that ecosystem but not competitive, that's where the sparks really fly, and you really notice that I can do a lot of talking and a lot of support, but in the end it's also about Canadians meeting Canadians that have already made that step in that ecosystem and can give the transparency that really adds value to the investment that these companies are making. So I think that's an important one, where I think most cultures, of course, seek other partners, but I notice working with Canadians, it's very much appreciated, and I'm very happy to see that at both sides of the aisle, Canadians in the Netherlands are really approachable in doing that for their colleagues here, as well as for us to be able to facilitate that as an intermediary. So yeah, another example is, for example, maritime, also a great connection between Halifax, where I believe a part of your team is, and Rotterdam maritime, of course, very big in Rotterdam, but also Eemland, Eemhaven. These areas, it really works when you have a maritime infrastructure with highly skilled workforce that are efficient, but yet also flexible to do what the maritime industry asks. So yes, that ecosystem has been very beneficial in mutually understanding, what you expect from people, both from a content as well as flexibility, from all these points that really help make that transfer of the investment as efficient as possible.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jaap. And one of the key pieces that you kind of hit on at the end about sort of the local workforce in attracting FDI, I think has shown in our research anyway to be quite impactful also. And I'd be interested to know, maybe offline, sort of what you think some of the pull factors were for the EMA to relocate to the Netherlands as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe Caricia, we'll move on to you for a last question before we start taking audience questions. So not to end on a very big topic and kind of put you on the spot a little bit, but really there's kind of no doubt that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the Canadian economy, and in some ways possibly permanently. So from your perspective, what do you think the biggest opportunities for FDI attraction for Canada in 2021 look like, or in certain areas?
Certainly. I think there's so many changes happening this year as a result of COVID, and some big changes this year that are really impacting trade, investment, and through supply chain disruption, geopolitical risks, trade restrictions. And while global supply chains won't be disappearing, they will be evolving. And we're already seeing this transformation taking place in Canada. I mean, in March, Canada had just produced half of 1% of its own personal protective equipment, its PPE. And now, over 7 months, we're at 70% production of our own PPE. So developing these critical products free from the risk of supply chain constraints, geopolitical pressures, and our manufacturing base is transforming itself. I mean, earlier this year, we heard stories of vodka distilleries and oil and gas refining companies making hand sanitizers, aerospace, automotive, and hockey equipment companies developing ventilators and face shields, and apparel companies like Long John's manufacturer Stanfields in the East Coast making medical gowns. So it's a really interesting shift we've been seeing in manufacturing in Canada, and a lot of innovative companies and technologies as well will be impacting manufacturing even further. And technologies such as AI and automation technologies. I mean, we're already a global leader in automation, advanced robotics, 3D printing, and we should continue to promote this. Yes, and there are other facts that when I mention it to other peers in the industry, other investors, they're not aware of, like the fact that Canada, we produce the largest AI patents per capita amongst the G7. That is something that we don't highlight as much in terms of our innovative capacity and what we're doing to transform other industries and sectors through AI technologies, through automation. And I also think there's potential for AR, VR technologies to potentially assist other industries that are negatively being impacted by the pandemic by bringing virtual experiences to consumers and businesses in segments such as retail and tourism. And it's interesting because we see it in Invest in Canada, where global investors are trying to figure out how to identify investment opportunities with the limitations of traveling here. So we're trying to figure out internally, how do we create virtual experiences for them to take a look at a potential facility or potential investment location. So we're already starting to see that ourselves. I also see a great opportunity for FDI in Canada's clean tech sector. The Global Clean Tech Innovation Index has ranked us first in G20 and fourth globally, with very high scores for our innovative emerging clean tech companies. And the government of Canada is looking to support more investment in this sector through public-private sector vehicles. And they want us to promote this. They want us to develop innovative clean tech products powered by hydrogen, electric vehicles, renewables. And we do have a government goal to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2050, because alongside COVID, we're still facing climate change. So supporting, investing low carbon energy sources and this goal to reach net zero by 2050 is going to be critical. And I fundamentally believe that in Canada, we have the assets, we have the right ingredients to meet these goals. We have the raw materials. We have a playground of established legacy industries, such as natural resources, that are already leveraging clean technologies to reduce those negative environmental impacts of their extraction processes. We have a highly skilled workforce. We have, I think, 2.8 million STEM graduates in Canada, and foreign investors are constantly asking us about our tech talent pool. And they want to know about tech talent from regions from coast to coast to coast. We have an innovative ecosystem, a lot of startups. We're known in rankings, global rankings for our innovative ecosystem. And we have the global market access. So I think we just need to pull together all these ingredients and promote them and share with potential global investors, share with peers in our network that we have all these strengths and advantages to offer FDI, potential investors?
Thanks, Carisia. Yeah, I think that last point you mentioned is really critical in some research that we've done on FDI, that was kind of a missing piece, and that Canada wasn't doing as great a job as they could be at really promoting the strengths that we do have, like our talent base, which is highly skilled in many capacities. So certainly I think that's going to be even more important as we try to recover from this economic crisis. I will stop here. I do have a few more questions, but we are running out of time. So I'll stop here and maybe let Tyler take it over with some questions from the audience.
Hi, everyone, again. So I have a first question from audience. Christopher, you did a fantastic job of highlighting how Hong Kong can be a springboard into Greater China. Now, this for Yup. Do you think it's fair to say that the Netherlands should be seen as Canada's springboard into Europe as a whole? And can the Netherlands help shepherd Canadian companies into the greater EU?
Yeah, good point. And yes, I think from multiple aspects, the Netherlands is a great gateway into Europe. We have, of course, within the European Union, we have free trade, but Holland also has a multitude of agreements globally to also get usually holding and incorporated structures from the Netherlands towards many different countries within and beyond the boundaries of the EU. And the Netherlands, we've seen it over the past years, has been a great logistical hub in getting goods from Canada into the Netherlands through our ports and through our through Schiphol, our airport network, and on a very cheap way using our river network facilities to get also bulk products from Canada through the harbors into the hinterland of Germany, Switzerland, France. So both from a fiscal and a financial perspective, it's very opportune with all regulatory options in place, but also from a logistical perspective, where I think from a goods and services, you got your great connectivity in train, car, railroad, waterways, as well as from a resource perspective, where of course we here in Toronto we have that crunch, and in most countries there is a crunch. But we're very fortunate that within the EU there's a great opportunity for different qualities and different nationalities to travel among countries and work within the countries. And Holland is a number one interest to get also the right resources from, for example, Spain, Italy, France, whether it's from a lingual perspective or from a capacity perspective, into the Netherlands to get to work for your Canadian company. So again, there it's very beneficial to not only look at Holland as, for example, 17 million, which is good as a test market, used a lot from that perspective, but also that stepping stone into that 170 million market, where even though you cross a couple of countries, there are no boundaries, there are agreements, and you can tap into the 170 million market just within a radius of 500 kilometers. So yes. Any other questions? I'm always happy to answer them concerning that stepping stone.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. And once again, Christopher, you made an excellent point. I think I'm going to quote you on this sometime if you'll let me. Going into a market, it can be easy, but being successful in doing it can be very hard. I would love to hear from each of the panelists here of, now that we've seen the shifts with COVID, and Carisia correctly identified that doing business now in other countries is going to be vastly different. What do you think are some of the best practices that ecosystems and government agencies should be looking at to ensure that the flow of FDI remains liquid?
I'll take first stab, I guess. I think it all goes back to going in, if you're a company going into a particular region, being under the auspices of a foreign direct investment agency is key, rather than trying to do it yourself. And the reason being is that I think all of us share the same remit, that we will help open the doors, we will help knock on doors if those doors weren't open at the beginning. We will leverage the existing connections with our local ecosystems that you would, not to say you wouldn't be able to do it yourself, but it'd be much more difficult. And things are hyper competitive out there. And why would you waste your time trying to create your own networks when we can all do that for you? I'd like to cite a major pension fund, investment management fund, and basically they went through us, and they basically credited us with removing 10 months of effort away from them. We shortened their development time frame from setup to not only expansion in Hong Kong, but also expansion to other parts of Asia Pacific, that we shortened the development time frame by a factor of 10 months. And for us, that's great credit. If they had spent that 10 months trying to figure out who to talk to where, the Asian financial market is a volatile place. Who knows what could happen? And this was before COVID-19. So we like to think that we help them not just with surviving their first year, but we actually help them get into their second year much faster.
That's great. Thank you. Carissa, did you have any response to that question from a Canadian perspective?
Yes. So we've noticed a lot of inquiries from investors asking about, what's the impact of these new government policies, new programs that are being announced from the finance minister or from federal government, from Justin Trudeau. They'll want us to distill that information fairly quickly. And our teams, we've all worked together to support that initiative and provide that information as quick as possible, and give a bit of assurance to foreign investors that we are there for them, that we will, distill all the policy information, hundreds of pages of documents. We'll bring it forward to them in an investor lens and tell them exactly how these policies will be impacting their future investments or the proposed investments. There's a lot of interest in niche industries, and we're seeing more interest in industries like hydrogen, battery vehicles, or electric vehicles, battery supply chain. And we're doing a lot of custom, or at least my team is doing a lot of custom research, where we're pulling together very detailed research for custom proposals. So we may not be doing a general, here's how tech talent is across Canada, but maybe we'll be doing something very specific. Here's what tech talent looks like in Eastern Canada for these particular verticals. And we find that's of high value to our investors, because they're still looking to invest. They're still looking at opportunities. And one of the challenges for them is getting that assurance, right, as to how things are changing for them through our policies, government support programs. Also figuring out what is the lay of the land, because they can't necessarily go and travel to all their proposed investment locations. So we're trying to work with them to create virtual experiences so that they can at least virtually view a potential investment location.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Well, over respect of everyone's time, we've gone over the hour. So I'll pass it back to Alexandra for closing remarks. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tyler. I think we've heard some really great insights and feedback today from our esteemed panelists on their experiences in their respective regions, and also how kind of the COVID-19 pandemic and really the overall shift in the global economy is impacting FDI as well as local technology ecosystems. So I won't take up any more time. I simply just want to relay a sincere thanks to the panelists today, as well as to our audience. And if you do have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.